Mhm. Hello and welcome to the skating lesson. My name is Dave Lees, and today I'll be interviewing Randy Hood, who is an attorney in a case against U.S. figure skating. Randy, welcome to the skating lesson.
Hey, David, how are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing well. I obviously saw your post that has been going around on Facebook regarding a case involving U.S. figure skating and Mark Cockerell. And I saw that you were trying to collect information about abuse cases going on in skating. And I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak about what you're doing and give people information about this. I think that there's a lot of trepidation, also a lot of intrigue about this case. So how did you become involved with the current case that you're pursuing?
My firm, I do sex abuse cases and have done them for a long time.
Mhm.
And I got a call about 4 weeks ago from someone who said that there was something that was a little strange. It sounded to me it was a little strange. And so I called her and I talked to her for a long period of time. And she said there was this thing going on at the rink where she skated, and there were some bad things going on or that had happened. And the more I dug in, because I immediately dug in, and the more I looked, the more I found, and then more people started contacting me. And now we've got 4 skaters. 2 parents have filed. I've got another skater I spoke to this morning that we will file later this week. I've got 3 others that are exploring whether to file or not, which would put us at around 8 from this one rink. There may be others. I've been contacted by people as far back as 1991 from Colorado Springs, where he coached, and people from Quad Cities, Iowa, Wooster, Ohio, a number of different places. And they all have the same type of issues and the same type of story as to what was going on. And if you have one person, you really have to wonder, well, is somebody saying something, or is this right? Is this true? Could this really occur? And they're all very similar. It's all very similar. And so before I file anything, because these are really serious allegations, very, very serious allegations. And before I do that, before I'm going to take someone to task, or I'm going to create some kind of paradigm about someone's life, I want to make sure and feel comfortable that these factual allegations are accurate and true. And after speaking to all these people and talking to them, looking at them, I felt very comfortable bringing this lawsuit, these series of lawsuits. And then there's a lot more to come.
So you haven't mentioned who you're actually suing yet, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak about that, because when you actually first had a press conference, there was an article in the Daily Mail, which is probably not everybody's dream outlet to start with a case, but you did have a press conference, which was a little bit unusual. And I wanted you to talk about why you did that and why the person that you are suing wasn't initially named.
That's two questions, so I'm going to address them one by one. One, the reason I had the press conference. The reason I had the press conference is usually when I have one of these types of cases, it's a one-off case. In this particular situation, I felt like there was a serial abuser, meaning someone who had offended at a bunch of different geographic locations. And a press conference gave me the best way of being able to notify other people in other areas that something had gone on that may be actionable or that they may need to know about. 2, that when you have this type of thing, whether it's this type of case, whether it's a medical malpractice case with a bunch of people, whether it's a large plane crash, whatever it is, if there are things that happen bad and you think that it could prevent it from happening in the future, it's my responsibility to do that. I think it's my duty and my responsibility. I'm not here just as a job. I think I have a greater duty and a greater obligation. That is, if I see something that I feel like there's an opportunity to protect someone or to keep something from happening that should not happen, then how can I not try to stop it? Mm-hmm. That would be terrible if I was not taking a proactive stance in that regard. Now, in regard to the anonymity, We did not name them in the very first lawsuit. We named certain identifying information. And once I had the press conference, I had people call me within the next day or two who actually said, well, this Olympian in Irmo, it has to be this guy. Is it him? And I was like, I can't confirm or deny that. And then, you know, and so it literally, I felt like because you had such identifying characteristics, which is necessary, in my opinion, for proper pleading to withstand any types of motions to dismiss from a legal standpoint, then it didn't make sense to just maintain that anonymity going forward. And so then the second case, we named Mark Cockerell, U.S. Figure Skating Association, and the rink, Light Fit and Fun or Flight Adventure Park.
Okay. You have worked on many sex abuse cases before. You informed me that you're doing a class action against Cheer. I wanted to ask you, why is this case different than others that you have pursued in the past?
First, real quickly, it's called a mass tort, as opposed to, there's a bunch of people that are consolidated in an action or even by themselves, but there's a bunch of them. So it's not really a class action. That's where it's one lawsuit and a bunch of people in it. This is more of a mass tort where you have a bunch of people with their each individual lawsuit. But in this type of a situation, the way that it's different is, one, you have a bunch of children involved, which we had. I'm trial counsel and co-lead counsel in the Cheer litigation that's going on right now. But in this particular situation, you have children and you have a lot of coaches. And what I'm finding is that this is unique. You're in this world. I'm not. I'm an outsider. The extent of my experience in ice skating came from Scott Hamilton in the 1984 Olympics and everyone getting behind him because we weren't there in 1980, or Russia wasn't there in 1980. And so, you know, it's, or whatever, I can't remember. Russia was there because that was the Miracle on Ice.
It was the summer that they boycotted, but it's okay. Yeah, no one's going to hold you accountable. Yeah.
But, you know, everybody loved Scott Hamilton. And Brian Boitano, and we've seen, you know, the whole Nancy Kerrigan and that saga, and we've seen the figure skaters, the pair skaters that were beautiful, and the choreography, and that's part of what we all grew up in, especially my age, the 50 and 60 and 70-year-old people. Olympic sports were huge because in the 80s and even in the 90s, when they came on, everything else went away because everybody watched. And for every 4 years, there was this darling or this person or someone that we all rooted for collectively. What I didn't understand, and I'm now beginning to understand, is not only the sacrifice, not only the commitment that was necessary by these figure skaters, but how many times someone has physically, emotionally, or sexually abused them, and that it was commonplace. And rather than someone do something about it, they just passed it on. And you went from rink to rink to rink, just like in the Catholic Church case where they would take a pedophile priest and they would just put him on an Indian reservation, or they would put him in a more rural area. They just passed the buck. And I'm seeing in this particular case a very similar set of circumstances. And that's really disturbing. And it isn't just sexual abuse, it's emotional abuse. What we're also seeing, and literally this is information I'm coming as of today. Before I met you, I spoke to someone. And some of the information that I'm getting today that I didn't know yesterday is that nationalities, things that are commonplace in other countries, grabbing someone, throwing someone around, screaming at someone, leaving marks on someone physically, that would be acceptable in another country, in an Eastern Bloc country, would never be acceptable here. And that some of these coaches that are used to, they're coming from a different paradigm in a different area and a different geographic acceptance of certain things that's just not tolerable here. because we aren't going to allow our children to get physically abused. And that's going on every day. Every day. As we sit here, there's a kid somewhere, or 5 kids, or 10 kids, or 20 kids that are right now getting emotionally and physically abused because you've got a coach that is simply breaching ethics and the standards of professional coaching in the figure skating world.
Yeah, and I have a question for you, and I'm going to explain why I'm asking it because it's kind of for 2 reasons. I wanted to know what kind of proof you need or that you collect before you sue, because there's a lot of coaches with Safe Sport who are very nervous because the rules are gray, the implementation is gray, and there are many cases where there is a feeling in skating that Safe Sport is even sometimes used um, to retaliate against, professional rivals or things like that, and it's being misused and mishandled. And then also, you mentioned having someone, a victim back in 1991, right? Potentially, or someone who knew there. So I'm curious, for that person who might be watching this out there, what kind of information or evidence would they need to have a lawsuit, against someone in this case?
First, I need their story and I need their timeline. And then I need to be able to go back and verify their timeline.
Mhm.
I need some other type of corroborating evidence. That they can tell me, okay, I was at this particular place at that particular time, and then they can get me a picture showing they were there at that particular time. Sometimes it's enough that they give me the information and I can then verify it with a second person, whether it's a parent, whether it's with a friend, whether it's someone else, that I've got someone else to corroborate their account of what occurred. And if I've got that, then I feel like I've got a significant enough amount of evidentiary basis to be able to bring some type of lawsuit. The Safe Sport, for what it's worth, Safe Sport, I think, with its original intent, was a great thing. It was much needed, but I think Safe Sport, there's real issues with Safe. One is it can be used for retaliation. You've got one coach that's pissed at another coach, and then they make a complaint against that coach, and it may not be about sexual abuse or anything like that. It could be anything, and so then Safe Sport's going to get involved. But the big problem to me with Safe Sport goes way beyond that. The big problem with Safe Sport is they knew about Mark Cockerell, and they've known about Mark Cockerell for a really long time. They only were started in 2017, and I know they've known about it. He's had complaints against him. But unless someone is willing to make their child's name publicly available, they will not continue an investigation because that's part of their foundational policies and procedures. If you will not agree to be publicly named, it's not like they're going to go out and say, hey, this person, but they've got to be able to tell the person that's being accused, hey, so-and-so, let's just say it's Jane Smith. Jane Smith has said you did this, but then that becomes public. And so they don't protect the anonymity of these people. And I understand that someone deserves to know who their accuser is. We named a Jane Doe in these cases, or Jane Rose. They all know who my people are. As soon as they contact me, I will give them their names. They will know that. That is something that I will exchange immediately. But under due process and under the law, there are protections with us. Until a judge tells me I must divulge the name, I don't have to divulge the name, but they'll know who it is. You don't have that same type of thing with Safe Sport. With Safe Sport, you have to tell them who it is, and then that's not protected by any kind of legal accountability. And so it's different. And so under a lawsuit and with judicial oversight, I don't have the same issue.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about this case, and you named Mark Cockerell, and I wanted to ask about U.S. figure skating because in this case, I was contacted by someone that I had told to contact you when the news of your press conference was published. And I did a quick public record search about Mark Cockerell, and the one thing that really stuck out to me was that he was at ice rinks all over the country. And I thought that that was slightly unusual for an Olympian with those kind of credentials to be moving around that much, because typically, talent flocks to success, right? Whether it's a coach or whether it's someone that has had previous success. But in figure skating, U.S. figure skating doesn't hire, the individual coaches. What is their liability in this case, or what is your theory of their liability?
Um, it's going to get technical, and I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
At the end of the day, whether it's any type of Olympic sport, it doesn't matter whether it's diving, gymnastics, track and field, basketball, anything that is an Olympic sport. They have something called a youth sports organization. That's like the bottom level. That would be the rink. The rink is the youth sports organization. For every youth sports organization basically in existence, you have something called a national governing body. And the national governing body is the entity that creates policies and procedures and creates things to protect these athletes in these youth sports organizations. They credential coaches, they verify coaches, they get complaints about coaches. They've got ways of maintaining data and information about persons who are problems. And so they have repositories of data, they have policies and procedures, and they have certification and verification. All three of those things, each by themselves, could create liability, but all three of them together creates really strong liability.
In your experience in cases like these, when someone is moving around the country, and perhaps they're getting a job through, networking or previous contacts, how does that happen, right? Like, are the rinks not notifying? What is someone's duty if, let's say, an ice rink pushes someone out of town, right? But it doesn't seem like there are always police reports that are filed. What is the duty of a rink, or of someone if they know about abuse that is going on?
I think that a rink should be notifying Safe Sport. I think a rink should be notifying U.S. Figure Skating. I think a rink should be notifying Professional Skaters Association, the people that certify and verify coaches. I think they ought to be notifying all three of them. I think that if there's criminal activity, there should be a criminal complaint made, but that's not the rink necessarily. That's someone else. But a rink, I would have to look at each state, but there are mandatory reporters. Mandatory reporting is a real issue. It's a serious thing. And if you have a duty to mandatory report, well, it's a criminal act if you don't report. There are repercussions if you don't report. But when you see someone that goes from rink to rink to rink to rink, when you are an Olympian, whoever it may be, if you're an Olympian and you have really good credentials, and your skaters are placing well, why do you keep moving on? And in this case, someone who was involved at one of the rinks where he was at previously had done an investigation into him because she had heard things, and she sent me an article from 2006 from Quad Cities, Iowa, where he had to leave that rink because of allegations. And that was in the paper. So, I think that there are things that have been going on for a really long time with different coaches, because I've been contacted now by numerous people over the last 2 weeks. And it isn't just this one coach. There's a number of coaches who either perpetrated in some type of misconduct or they turned a blind eye to it under their watch. They knew it was going on with one of their assistant coaches and they just didn't do anything about it. They knew it was going on and did nothing. I don't know why. I don't think we can ever figure out unless we go to someone and say, hey, why didn't you do something? And I don't know what the answer is. In the sport of figure skating, you, David, you're so experienced in this. You talk to people every day. This is your life. You understand the political ramifications. You understand the underpinnings and the types of things that are going on. You understand how the interaction is between the skater, the rink, the skating club, the U.S. Figure Skating, Professional Skaters Association. You understand all these factions and how they work together. I don't understand why someone doesn't just say, hey, this guy's doing something wrong. We're going to tell the people, go tell the police, and then we're going to report them to everybody, and you're no longer welcome here, sir or ma'am. But that isn't what's going on. Why not? And I think that that goes to a much deeper issue, a much, much, much deeper issue. And that is that there seems to be some type of willingness to accept bad behavior as long as people are producing results.
Mhm.
And
I
that's,
want to ask, I want to ask about the mandated reporter and whether or not they can be sued. I was contacted by someone after Gracie Gold's book was published. This person said I was, sexually abused by the same person who Gracie wrote about in her book. They sent me the Safe Sport documents with that. And there was a coach who was notified, right, after speaking to this individual. Is that coach someone that could be sued for not taking appropriate action?
if somebody did not,
if they didn't, yeah.
And they knew about it and they were aware of it and they could have prevented it, yes, that person is potentially at risk of getting sued.
Mhm. And are you in this mass tort? Are you only focused on Mark Cockerell, or are you now expanding to other coaches under the umbrella?
We're as I said, we're lead counsel and chair. We're co-lead counsel with the Strom law firm in Columbia. But through that, we learned that it wasn't just one coach, one gym. It's everywhere. It's endemic. And so we knew going into this, once we filed, it's a matter of time before it started to expand. And it has now began to expand. In the last 2 days, on Saturday and Sunday, I've had 8 different calls from across the United States of America, from different people, skaters, all skaters, anywhere from people from 16 that had started when they were 10 until I've got somebody, the oldest that I've been contacted by is someone who's 32, in all ages in between. But I am convinced, because I know of the 1991 case, I know of people in their late 40s that this has occurred to. And so this is not something that is new. It's not something that wasn't known. This is something that has been known. There's been an issue and nothing's been done about it forever. And so I think that there's beginning to become at least an acknowledgement. Yes, some stuff is going on that just can't keep going on. And I haven't read Gracie Gold's book. I ordered it today on Amazon.
Yeah, I think you should. We can have a good conversation offline about this. Yes.
Absolutely. Because I want to understand the mindset and the mentality of someone who's such a celebrated and seems like an incredible human being, and what they have to go through. But at the end of the day, that type of memoir is the type of thing that brings light to something that needs light brought. And that is everything about this skate. I mean, it's a beautiful sport. It's a gorgeous sport. It may be the most beautiful sport that we have from an artistic standpoint. And it should be celebrated and loved and lifted up. And when you have this type of situation that underlies it, it's the seamy underbelly of what's going on, then something needs to occur to create boundaries that people can't exceed. And if we do that, we protect everyone. We protect children, we protect parents, we protect coaches, because then they know, okay, if I operate within this, I'm good. Right? Protects everybody.
So I have a question too about mandated reporter, and what does that mean? Because one of the interesting things about figure skating is that politically, a lot of people are told to stay out of things, right? You see things, you know things, don't ask questions, right? And I thought it interesting because there was a skater who once performed to the song about Kesha, which she wrote about being raped. And this was a skater who competed internationally, which means that US figure skating would have to sign off on that program. And I thought that that was very curious. And then in talking to coaches, they said, well, I never asked her anything about it. I didn't know anything about that. What is the kind of, what does it mean to be a mandated reporter, and a proof about seeing things? Because there are people in US figure skating that have been in high positions that have been in the same rink of coaches who have been pushed out before. And it does, lend itself to a lot of questions about what it means to be a mandated reporter and whether or not they acted in that capacity.
Every state is different. Every single state is different. It all depends on the state. But I think that you can take from a common sense standpoint, if you see something, if you, David Lee, see something, you go to a rink and you see a 55-year-old man kissing a 14-year-old girl on the lips and groping her butt, that's wrong. You know it's wrong. I know it's wrong. Everyone knows it's wrong. And so, one, you need to report it to the rink. Two, the skating club, US figure skating, and the parent, whoever the parent is, you need to say, hey, you need to go report that to law enforcement. You may need to do it yourself, but the rink is a youth sports organization. By reporting it to the rink, they are mandatory reporters in most states. A youth sports organization is a mandatory reporter in most states. So if you tell them, they need to report it.
Well, let's talk about this because Rhonda Fain did tell her boss, right, Steve Penny, about Larry Nassar when that happened. But she was someone that was really named in those lawsuits against Larry Nassar and USA Gymnastics. So is telling a higher up at your organization fulfilling your duty?
It depends on if you are a mandatory reporter. If you are a nurse, Larry Nassar was a doctor. A nurse is a mandatory reporter. Any person who's in the medical chain is a mandatory reporter. So you don't get the pass of saying, okay, well, I told someone. Well, you don't get that pass because you yourself are a mandatory reporter. But if you're at a rink, David, and you see it, you aren't a mandatory reporter, but you should be telling somebody. Now, some states, it may even require you to be a mandatory reporter if you're just a common person that sees something. I see somebody, if I see a kid getting abused, I'm going to call 911. Something where somebody's in danger, of course. But if I see something where it doesn't make sense, I'm going to pay attention. And then we're going to get into a much different thing here just for 30 seconds. And I apologize. I think we all have a moral obligation. If we see a child sitting at a table in a restaurant who's dirty and unclean and who is shying away from someone, and you see them barking at them and raise their hand to them, what do you do? Do you call 911? Do you go over there and say something? If you say something to them, you might get shot. And so, I think that's, you've always got to err on the side of caution. And, and sometimes there's going to be bad things that occur. Let's say that you make something and it turns out that there was nothing there. And then you brought someone's life into, you made life hell for somebody because they had to answer to law enforcement. I would say it's worth saving one child than it is for discomfort to somebody to answer for something for which there was nothing that was wrong. Always err on the side of caution.
Now, your website in the advertisement that you put out mentioned emotional abuse. And I wanted to ask you about that because there is a large case that has been for safe sport for a long period of time. There have been USA Today articles about one pair coach in particular from Colorado Springs. Can you talk about emotional abuse and what that kind of liability is?
Sure. Emotional abuse is when a coach is breaching a standard of of figure skating coach professional obligations and duties. That may be if you've got a 14-year-old girl who is 5'5" and weighs 100 pounds, you're telling her she's fat. You're fat. You're fat. You're ugly. You look terrible. You're embarrassing me. And then she develops an eating disorder. And she's in rehab for 30 days, and she's got that eating disorder for the rest of her life. That's emotionally abusive. You can't do that. And so, you know, there are boundaries. I can't sit here and give you a bright line. There's a famous Supreme Court case that says where they discuss what is pornography. And the answer is, you know it when you see it. And I think emotional abuse is one of those things where you know it when you see it. And when you see something that exceeds what you consider to be the boundaries of good care. Is a coach supposed to destroy an athlete, their confidence and everything else? No. I mean, do you have to be stern with them? Do you have to get the best out of them? Do you have to push them? Of course you do. Because you're not going to get the best out of them. They're kids. And so, but there's a point of your professional duty and obligation as a coach and saying, hey, you know, we got to do better. And you may raise your voice, and that's not emotional abuse, but constantly berating, telling someone they're terrible, telling them that they're fat, telling them that they should be ashamed of themselves, telling them they're ugly, you know, tell them they're too tall, they're too short, you know, or if they've got, you know, they may show some type of orientation towards a same-sex relationship, and then using, you know, slurs, or they may be of a different race and they call them, you know, a racial slur. Those are things that are not tolerated in society. So why should they be tolerated within a coach-student experience?
You mentioned cases dating back to 1990, 1991. You know, obviously you are pursuing justice in the civil lane. How does the statute of limitations differ in terms of a civil action versus a criminal action?
Criminal action is, the first thing is, in a criminal action, you have to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt. That means you have to prove that somebody did something beyond any shadow of any doubt. Basically, you must be certain that it occurred. And in a civil case, you have to prove that something is by a preponderance of the evidence. So if you have a scale of justice, if you tilt it ever so slightly in one way, you win. So if you're on the 50.1 yard line, you win. And that's a difference. And the rules of evidence are different. The big problem, and you mentioned something in this, and I'm going to extrapolate on it. Statute of limitations is an issue. And there are people where stuff happened 34 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 50 years ago, where it's an issue. Well, that all comes down to a state by state analysis, because there are some states that have safe harbor acts where they have now allowed people to go back because sex abuse is such a horrible, horrible issue, that they may be able to go back and still bring the case, even though it may have happened decades ago. There are other states where they have discovery rules, where if someone had emotional harm or they had physical harm, and they went to counseling, but they didn't realize for 10 years that all this stuff was caused because this person sexually abused them. They just thought they had a bad life and they had stuff. But then one day they pick this up, or they see your podcast, or they see this interview, and they say, gosh, you know what? That's where it's all coming from. That's discovery. They see this lawsuit and it triggers someone, and they then discover, wow, this is all what this is caused by, because of all this stuff. And I know that may sound a little insane, but it's not, because I don't know who out there who sees this understands trauma response, but trauma response for sexual abuse takes many different forms. And sometimes it isn't as simple as someone going, oh, hey, this person raped me, so I know that my new eating disorder, or I know that, you know, now that I can't speak to somebody. They don't necessarily put one and one together. 1 and 1 does not equal 2 in that situation. It takes time sometimes. It takes therapy, sometimes years of therapy, because they may consider themselves, a terrible person. They may think that, hey, I caused this. It was my fault. I dressed provocatively, so I should have known that this was going to happen. And it takes years of therapy. And until you become aware from a trauma response standpoint that this was caused because of this person, sometimes that will toll the statute of limitations. It is not repressed memory. And that's part of it too. You may have a repressed memory. It is the understanding of their act caused this problem. And trauma response, especially in sexual trauma cases, that's a very complicated issue.
I want to talk to you a little bit about anonymity, because I have spoken to many victims over the years, and a lot of times they don't want their name tarnished, especially because of what can happen with Googling, and also what can happen when someone is named in certain cases. I reported on something and received death threats at one point in time, so I was wondering about the anonymity and how protected is that?
It really depends on the judge. I think that there's a really, really strong, I think there's a really, really strong argument to be made that someone who was hurt when they're a minor, or they're still a minor, should be granted anonymity and should maintain that anonymity. I think that there's a possibility a judge somewhere could say, hey, you need to name them. I mean, they're never going to be named at first. If they're named 6 months in, it's not even in the news anymore, so nobody's probably ever going to even know. But at the end of the day, if you aren't willing to come forward, it's going to be a perpetuation of the abuse. And so the young ladies and that have come forward, they're heroes. They're heroes because they are putting everything on the line, because to them, and I'm not saying this is for somebody else. I'm not saying this to shame someone. I'm not saying this for anything else. I'm saying it for these young ladies, that they're heroes because they're willing to put it out there because they know something needs to be stopped. Doesn't mean that somebody else that has let it go. But I'm telling you, I've talked to so many women. I haven't had one man call me yet. I haven't had a male that's been abused by a coach. I've had so many women tell me, I wish I would have done something earlier. Over and over and over, I have heard that. And now they're like, okay, if I can't be in this, I'm going to be a witness because I'm going to stand up. I'm going to be heard because this cannot be allowed to continue to exist. Not in the situation, not in the way that it is today.
Now, talk to me about the Jane Rose in this case, which appeared to be the mothers. When I read the complaints, I'm not familiar with parents suing independently of their children in the past. So can you talk a little bit about those cases?
Sure. In South Carolina, and it may not be this in every state, but in South Carolina and many states, there's something called a necessaries claim. If a child has been harmed and the parent is responsible for the payment of medical bills, payment of psychological bills, rehab, like if there's an eating disorder, anything up until the time they're 18 years old, or if they have to provide extraordinary medical care for them in some way, or if they had to miss a bunch of work to take care of their child, then they're entitled to that. It is not any kind of emotional damage. It's purely economic, what they're out of pocket as a result of these actions.
I wanted to ask you about a case. There got to be a little bit of a loophole in terms of investigations, and this is something that probably would be interesting to you. But there was a case regarding John Coughlin after he committed suicide. He was being investigated by Safe Sport. Safe Sport decided that they were not going to proceed with that investigation because, in that case, they said that there was no, clear and present danger against kids because, unfortunately, John Coughlin, committed suicide. But U.S. Figure Skating wanted Safe Sport to continue that investigation, at least in terms of what they were saying in the press. And Safe Sport was saying that they should hire an outside counsel, essentially, to go and do that. Now, nothing ever came of that. In those cases, is that something that's unusual to you, or is that something that deserves to be looked at? If they knew that there was a culture that Safe Sport said that there was a culture of abuse in figure skating that should be investigated.
I think that's a passing of the buck. by somebody somewhere, because whether someone takes their life or someone gets sick and passes away or someone has a tragic accident and dies, if they have done something wrong, people need to know, because there's recourse available to people when someone is engaged in bad behavior. And not only that, but anytime that there's ever been someone where there's been credible allegations of abuse, other people know about it, whether it's the skating rink, whether it's the skating club associated with that rink, whether it's the professional skating association, whoever it may be, they know about it. And so you're identifying what you've just said is so incredibly important. It's creating a culture of safety. And when you know that there was a danger, and you know that danger existed, you know that people were aware of that danger, and they did nothing about it, unless you unless you do an investigation, unless you undertake the duty and responsibility to put some light on that issue, you're never going to stop the abuse from occurring. It only happens when you shine light on a situation. Otherwise, it just stays in darkness. It stays underneath. You got to shine the light. When you shine the light, the roaches will scurry. And it's important that we protect the children, because at the end of this, whether it's a young adult, because I have one that was a young adult that started after the age of 18, and I don't want to leave the young adults out of this, because there are young adults that start this too. Whether it's a child or a young adult, they don't deserve this type of thing to occur. And if people know about it and then they don't do anything about it, it just continues to exist. I appreciate you, because you're out here, you're a steady, strong voice in this community, and you're giving voice to folks. That's incredibly important. You're doing a good thing.
Well, I wanted to ask about the reason I asked you about John Coughlin is because there were many victims, or alleged victims in that case. And because Safe Sport didn't continue that investigation for them, I think there's perhaps that they felt justice denied, right? Justice delayed, justice denied, because that case never went anywhere. I know, are those people that you'd be interested in speaking to and learning more about, about how that happened and what happened?
Of course. I mean, we are here to listen to anybody, because at the end of the day, it takes a lot of guts. Even if you decide you don't want to do anything, it takes a lot of guts to pick up the phone and call and talk to somebody about this, because it's a horrific thing, especially when you're a child, because we all understand, almost everybody I know, we've been messed up by our parents. We've been messed up by bullying or somebody saying something. There are things that go on in any kid's life that cause issues. But when you have someone who is a trusted confidant, supposedly, who you're supposed to look up to, who you're supposed to follow, who you're supposed to do whatever they say, because supposedly they have your best interest in mind, and they're trying to get you to a certain level. And then that's the person that completely breaches your trust and does horrible things to you, and things that are going to affect you the rest of your life. You need to have the ability to go back and try to have some type of recourse.
So if someone is out there watching this show, how can they best get in touch with you about, discussing their case or potential case?
They can go to our website. It's www.mcgowanhood.com, McGowanhood.com, or they can call 803-327-7800, 803-327-7800. And they can talk to someone, and then they will basically just get their information, and then they will get it to me. I'm working on this with attorney Chad McGowan. Our firm is McGowan Hood. We've got 20 lawyers, but Chad and I are working on this together. Bakari Sellers, he is also a commentator on CNN. But Bakari Sellers and one of his law partners, Jessica Fickling, with the Strom Law Firm. And we're working together collectively, because honestly, I think this is probably going to become a national issue. And we will have people from a bunch of different states. I mean, I've already got people that I've talked to from probably about 9 different states. And it's just a matter of us figuring out, okay, what's actionable, what's not. Is somebody legitimate, is somebody not? Because the thing that you said is really important. We've got to be able to verify.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just take somebody calls up and says, hey, this happened, but they can't verify it. They can't prove it. Then it's going to be really, really hard to bring that on someone's behalf. But if they can show, hey, listen, I've got this story, and here's a picture, or I've got this person who was with me and they know about it, or my parent was there, or this other skater was there. Somebody, anybody that can be, a secondary corroboration of that issue, then they've got enough proof that in my mind is probably going to be enough to be able to bring a claim. And so, just call us, contact us. And on our website, there's a contact. They can contact us.
Now, you said that a lot of these. Oh, sorry. You were saying,
give my cell number.
I have. How about you said that in this case against Mark Cockerell that you're hearing a lot of similar type stories. What are the things that you are hearing? Because I'm wondering, I know a lot of different coaches who, their athletes might have, competed against, Mark Cockerell's athletes, and maybe they didn't, see something, but they may have knowledge. Are those people you want to talk to? I mean, what are the kinds of things that you're hearing?
The thing that I've seen over and over and over and over and over is inappropriate comments about physical attributes. I mean, talking to 14-year-old girls about someone else's legs or their butt or their breasts, telling 14-year-old girls that you love them, you want them to live with you, telling them that you want them, to move with you. When you have rubbing, they're in a skirt and you're rubbing their thigh, their inner thigh up near their vaginal area with your hand as a 14-year-old nobody should be doing that as a 14-year-old. I mean, a man should never be doing that with a 14-year-old girl, period. Rubbing their breasts, putting your arm around them and then taking the side of it and rubbing your hand along their breast, putting your hand on their buttocks and rubbing their butt. These are men. These are grown men with children. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. Shaming someone, calling someone who's just a normal sized person, who's a figure skater in a rec program, not someone who is skating for nationals. Mm-hmm. Rec programs and rec competitions, where there may be medals, no money, no nothing, just some medals, but still very important to someone. And you're telling them they're fat, they have no chance, they're terrible, and just doing things that are just unheard of. If it was a parent, they would get reported to DSS. Why is it okay for a coach if a parent can't or shouldn't? And so, but these are the things that I'm hearing from a lot of different people in different states, across different rinks. And then I've got articles, the Quad Cities article. But I've got all of these different people reporting the same stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think it's well known that there may have been someone that lived with him underage, and then she became pregnant. I don't know if it was underage or over the age, but that there were other people, other children that had followed him from rink to rink who were minor children that lived with him. Mm-hmm. More than one that I'm aware. I'm not saying I'm right. This is just what I've heard. But at the end of the day, I think that the sexual, the inappropriate touching, the emotional abuse, those are things that are common factors that I've seen in a number of different people from different rinks and different states.
Can you explain the South Africa situation? There's some stuff that's, I don't even know if it was published or rumored. These are threads about this, but that Mark Cockerell was the skating director of South Africa, where there wasn't even an ice rink. So can you explain that?
Got nothing. We have not. We don't know. We know that he was in South Africa. Mm-hmm. We just don't know. I know nothing about it. I know it existed, and I know he was there for a period of time. Mm-hmm. I don't know anything that went on while he was there.
In your experience dealing with other cases of sexual abuse, how many people does it usually take to protect someone like this? I mean, how many people have known about these kinds of details over the years that they and failed to act?
I don't know how many people have seen it. I know statistically 1 out of 4 women are victims of sexual abuse and 1 out of 6 men. I know that the average offender, and I could be wrong, somebody can probably chat GPT me, but I think they offend 60 times before they're caught. So there's a lot of abuse that goes on, and this is anywhere, anybody, in any sport, any organization, any religious organization, anywhere, that there's a lot of abuse that goes on before someone is ever caught. And I don't think it's ever because of some one thing, because at the end of the day, think about it. I think it's really well known. And if you really dig in, that most abusers, I'm not talking about Mark Cockerell. This is a general conversation we're having. Most abusers are maybe sociopathic, meaning they have no guilt, no remorse. Most are narcissistic. They may be narcissistic sociopaths. They may just be narcissists. But there are certain behavioral traits that are intrinsic to most of them. But at the end of the day, they have offended over and over and over, and it's because they groom a kid. The entire rubric of grooming is secrecy and isolation. That's their bedrock. That's their stock in trade, is secrecy. It's this clandestine relationship that they're the members of, they're parties to. It's just the two of them. Now, there may be other kids going on at the same time, but to that one child, it's just them. It's just them. They're special. They're special. When in reality, it's a sexualized form of, or foreshadowing, because at the end of the day, they know where they want this to end, in some type of sexual manner. And in the child's mind, it's just an adult that loves them and cares about them and has their best interest at heart. So the secrecy, the clandestine nature of this relationship and their isolation is the type of thing that makes it very hard to catch someone whose intent is to harm that child. They don't want anybody to know, because then they have to face the music with a criminal prosecution.
You keep mentioning children. There are a lot of pair skaters that have, spoken out about being abused over the years. Many involved in safe sport cases that were young adults when it happened. Are those people that can seek civil action as well?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If you were abused in any way, absolutely, because it isn't one of I think Jane Doe number 1 was over the age of, was 21 when the first interactions began. So yes, absolutely, and we have filed suit on behalf of that person.
I just wanted to give you one more chance to let people know how to get in touch with you, because we were talking over each other at that point. So yeah, if you can just repeat for everyone. My apologies before.
No problem. I just thank you so much for your grace and having me here and allowing me to speak about this, because it's very important to me. My law firm is www.mcgowanhood.com, McGowanhood.com, McGowanhood.com. And our number is 803-327-7800, 803-327-7800, or they can get in touch with you and you can give them my cell phone number.
Okay. Thanks for putting that on me, Randy, but it's going to happen no matter what. Well, thank you so much for coming on and speaking about this. I know that a lot of people are really interested in this case.
David, thank you so much, brother. God bless you.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right, man.